Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. Is it realistic to have a flawless and perfect houseplant collection? Absolutely not. Unless you live in the perfect climate, something tropical where you get consistent heat, humidity, where there's no bugs, and you have an endless supply of fertilizer, then you're definitely going to struggle just like, well, like this one right here. She's looking a little crispy. I live in Canada. Right now it's the middle of winter and sometimes we struggle. I think it's even funnier that this little dry piece is just dangling from the leaf. And probably like most people, I work a full-time job, so I don't have like 8 hours a day to dedicate to plant chores or anything. So sometimes they get a little bit crispy like this. They do get neglected. Yeah, some of them, they're just not looking the greatest. So I'm going to talk about the reasons why some of the leaves look like this and some ways that you can help your plants along if you don't have all the time to dedicate to your plants. Now what I do pretty much weekly is I'll go around my collection and I'll be looking for any unsightly or damaged leaves like this alocasia right here. Now I know there's plenty of debate on the internet with people saying not to cut off yellowing leaves as the plant is reabsorbing nutrients, or some people will say to cut them off right away as it's basically taking nutrients or energy away from the plant. I don't really pay attention to that too much just because it's already dying, and some things that I've read is that the plant will absorb nutrients or sugars back into the plant long before the leaf actually turns yellow. So really I don't pay attention to any of that. I simply just take my pruning shears and I cut it off. The plant looks much better already. I've never noticed a plant just suddenly struggle or die because I cut off a yellow leaf. So don't pay attention to any of that. If you don't like the way a leaf looks, just cut it off. Now there's always a reason why a leaf will turn yellow. Sometimes it's just the natural progression or aging of the plant. It'll shed its lower leaves with time and then it'll start pushing out some beautiful new ones. Now what I do after cutting off a leaf is I like to inspect it for pests. I've been dealing with thrips and spider mites and all that kind of stuff over the years. So that's the first thing that I look for. I not only look on the front of the leaf for damage, but also the back. You want to look for webbing as well as little streaking. I'll see if I can find a leaf that has been previously damaged by thrips. Guaranteed there's going to be one, but I'll find one. But that's what I normally do after cutting off a leaf, is just checking for any pests themselves or pest damage. And that's what I did with this large splendid leaf. So don't get me wrong, sometimes it definitely hurts. It's a little painful to cut off a leaf, but this one, it's showing signs of, I believe, spider mite damage or even thrips. You can see some of these kind of speckling areas. There's even a little bit of damage up here on the back side. I didn't actually find any thrips or anything like that, but there's definitely signs of damage, and I have found thrips on some of the lower leaves, which just happen to be right there. And you can see up here, it's starting to get yellowing there as well. So I have treated it in the past just with like an insecticidal spray, but I cut this leaf off. You can see it's not terrible, but if there's any of those microscopic spider mites, I don't want it to infect the rest of the plant, and it's just easier to cut it off and treat it. A lot of times it's really difficult to actually diagnose what's causing the yellowing or damage on the leaves. It could be anything from having a problem with the root system. This one seems pretty healthy. Whoops. You could have improper soil. You could have soil that's just staying wet for too long. It could be your watering frequency. You could be watering too often or too much, as well as too little. A lot of times I'm a chronic underwater, and you can actually get root rot from underwatering your houseplants. But it could also be a nutrient issue. Sometimes you can see yellowing just simply because it's lacking certain nutrients. There's actually some pretty good resources online with picture diagrams of why your leaves are turning yellow. Now, I'm not even going to touch the nutrient deficiency spectrum just because I have no idea. I'm not an expert when it comes to fertilizer or anything like that. I simply just add it in my watering can and that is it. This guy I know gets pretty dry frequently, but basically you just start from the start and kind of troubleshoot the issues. I always like to first look at the root system if it is experiencing root rot and that sort of thing, but this guy is in a pot with some very nice roots at the bottom there. So it's almost to the point where it is now encircling. So I have to watch out for any root bound type issues. So that can definitely cause yellowing on the leaves, is when the plant, it's so root bound, it's not receiving any moisture and that sort of thing. For me, it's simply, I forget this plant and I just let it get too dry. If it's not in a clear pot like this one and you can easily inspect the roots, then you can always take a plant out of the pot just to see what it's doing. So I like to use a little butter knife, just go around the edges and just pop it out of the pot and see what you're dealing with. So this guy right here clearly has some root rot issues. The roots, these ones aren't bad. This one is literally falling off. This one is super squishy. So at some point, it has definitely gotten root rot. Like, all of these roots are mushy. So this is why I say it's always good, if you have a plant that is struggling, to look at the root system. I wasn't expecting it to be rotten like this. Normally you want to see these nice big chunky roots like this. But when you can pull off the outer sheath and you have this little string in there, or if you have black roots, then yeah, they're just falling off, it's dying. So I'm glad I took this one out of the pot. I'll deal with this later, but you simply just cut back all the dead and dying. Oh my goodness, this thing is just, yeah, it's not good. So I'm glad I took this one out of the pot. We'll leave it for now. I was explaining earlier that I let this one get way too dry, but the roots look really healthy. Now, the same thing probably happened with this plant. Basically, it was way too dry, and I can tell that just from the outer sheath here. You can see it's kind of all shriveled up and just not looking good. And then when you water it, it just continues the rotting process. Now, if you have a plant that has been overwatered, or it sits in like wet, soggy soil for too long, then you'll start to see those kind of brown, black, mushy roots. These ones, they're just like regular root color, but they just dried up. So 100% this was my fault. There's a couple things that I can change. One, I can put it in a plastic pot. Obviously terracotta, it dries out way too fast, and this one, obviously it got crispy. So this is my fault. It started to show signs of kind of crispiness on the leaf. So definitely that was my fault, and I just need to change the pot type. So I'm going to be switching it from a terracotta to a plastic. Plastic obviously retains moisture longer than terracotta. Terracotta absorbs soil moisture and helps evaporate it out. So yeah, not good. I do get a lot of questions from people asking why their plant isn't growing or why it's just not looking the greatest. 9 times out of 10, when you dive into the type of care that they're giving it or the location of their plant, it comes down to a lighting issue. It's probably not receiving enough light. Now, for example, this cactus, they are known for needing a lot of light. I would only suggest like a south-facing window. They need at minimum of about 6 hours a day of bright direct sunlight. Now, if you have a plant like this philodendron here in the south-facing window with all of that bright light for more than 6 hours a day, you're probably going to scorch the leaves. So this is probably not the best location for this plant. So knowing where to place a specific plant is key to whether it thrives or whether it declines. I like to measure my light source by a little digital light meter. I like to use the foot candle setting. Now there's a lot of resources online, one of them being Houseplant Journal. He has a whole list of what each specific plant requires, each type of plant. So for instance, you can look at the Aglaonema, and it has the minimum light levels. So for the Aglaonema, it says at minimum of 100-foot candles, and it says you can tolerate between 1 to 2 hours of direct sunlight as well. So this is a fantastic resource. I'll leave it down in the description of this video, the link for that. But this is just one way to help you properly find the best location for your plant. Because I know we've all heard, place your plant in bright indirect light, but what does that actually mean? This places a number value on what your plant is supposed to be receiving, and then you can obviously use a digital light meter. I'm going to be putting it to the foot candles, and then I'll be changing the setting here. So you can use this little sensor. So right now, under these grow lights that I have on the ceiling, it's getting 245, 43 foot candles. This is one of my east-facing windows in my house. I have a couple Hoyas on here, and I'm just going to use my light meter, this light meter app. Right now it's only getting about maybe 170 foot candles, so this is a low light area, but for this type of plant, it's probably a good spot. Now when I come over to this area here, I have a few other plants, but I do supplement it with a grow light. When I place it underneath, it's around 1100 foot candles. And if I come nice and close to this window, I'm just going to put the light meter right there. It's actually getting some pretty decent light. It depends on the angle, I guess, but right there it's about 400. So I'm going to put it right on the leaf. Make sure it's not blocked. I'm going to put it back here a bit. So as you can see, with each spot, obviously the foot candles go up and down, but right now this fiddle leaf fig is getting around 400 foot candles right there. Back even just, you know, half a foot or a foot, it's down to about 80 foot candles. So quite a change, even though it's really close to a window. You can see just how much the foot candle reading changes as you come away from a window. So we're already cutting down in half. Back here, pretty much no light. And then as we get into the light source with the grow lights, you can see it comes back up to the pretty much high light range. And then here's my big south-facing window. It's actually pretty cloudy out, but we do have some sun kind of peeking through right now, so I'm just going to put that right here for now. And you can see we're getting about, well, 1700 foot candles or so. Right there, little change in direction, about 2100 foot candles. So higher light definitely when you get it nice and close to a south-facing window. And obviously you want to choose the right plant for the right location. So again, dependent on the plant, like I have my Monstera Thai constellations, some philodendrons, some alocasias around here, it's getting about 440 foot candles from this light right here. But my jade plant, again, requires much more light than these philodendrons. I have it much closer to the plant itself, and I have it changed to ×10. So right now, this plant is receiving about 2100 foot candles. So the succulent or this jade plant is receiving high light, extremely high light, whereas the Thai constellation and philodendron, they're probably receiving more of the medium light. And that's what this digital meter is for, is just to help you better place your plants so that they can grow and thrive. Low light is anywhere between 50 and 250 foot candles. Medium is between 250 and kind of 500 to kind of that 700 range. Anything over 700, more specifically 1,000 foot candles or higher, is considered high light. So that's just a kind of a general guideline just to help you better place your plants. I'm going to show you a little trick about knowing when to water a houseplant, just because when you have them in larger pots like this one, sometimes it can be difficult to place your finger all the way down to the bottom of the pot. That's just not possible, and I don't like to use a light meter. What I use is just this little bamboo skewer. All you do is place it in the soil, stick it all the way down to the bottom, like that. Let it sit there for a couple seconds kind of thing, and when you pull it out, if the soil is saturated, you should be able to see moisture levels on the stick or on the wood. You should be able to feel it. It's maybe a little damp at the bottom here, and I'll do it again. And sometimes when the soil is damp, you should have little bits of dirt or soil sticking to the skewer. You can see maybe just a little bit at the bottom there. So this is like probably 95% dry. So I'm just going to thoroughly saturate this anthurium here, and then I'll show you what it looks like afterwards for a well-watered plant. So it's already coming out the bottom, but I'm just going to give it some more water here, and then I'll let it sit for a minute. I just want to make sure that it is thoroughly saturated. So this is how I water my plants. I will thoroughly soak it until it comes out the bottom of the drain hole. Okay, it's probably been about 20 seconds. Just going to stick this all the way to the bottom, let it sit there for a minute. You see the top of the soil is wet. Now when you pull it out, you can see there is soil sticking to the stick, and you can feel the moisture as well. So I like this method just because, yeah, you can get a whole pack of these bamboo skewers at the dollar store for pretty cheap. Oh, what's going on here? Sticking. Just put it all the way to the bottom, pull it out. You can see there's soil on the stick. If you have soil like halfway down the pot, then you know half of the, or at least the bottom portion of the pot is damp and the top half is dry. So obviously the top's going to dry out first because it's going to evaporate much quicker than lower in the pot. I have these 4 plants, this cactus, this anthurium, this philodendron, this is a crawling philodendron, and this variegated Bob C is a climbing philodendron. These 4 plants require different watering techniques. This anthurium, I would probably only let it get maybe 50% dry before I water it again. This cactus, I want it absolutely bone dry. I don't want any soil moisture in there before I give it some water. This philodendron, I'll probably let it get almost dry, so maybe like 80% dry, maybe 90%, and then I will water this one again. Now with these crawling philodendrons, they like kind of that moist forest floor. That's what they do in their natural habitat. They grow along the forest floor where it's very damp. There's lots of mineral-rich material. These ones, they don't tolerate getting as dry as, say, like a regular philodendron, like this one. I would probably let this maybe get 50%, maybe 60% dry, and then I will give it a good thorough soaking. So the watering frequency is different for all of these plants. Now again, just do a little bit of research. There's plenty of information online about specific plants where it comes to cactus, anthurium, alocasia, philodendron, all that kind of stuff. But just knowing what the basic requirements are for each plant will help it thrive and grow, and yeah, it'll create less trouble. Just gonna go around and find a few more leaves that are just looking a little crusty, and same thing, I'm just gonna cut them off. That way my collection is looking healthy and it's going to rejuvenate, or it's gonna get new growth. So you don't need these nasty little leaves like this one right here. Look at this beautiful one. Oh, it's got a little damage there. Something like that, this little deformed area was probably caused by a thrip at some point, but I'm going to cut that leaf off, put it in the pile for the compost, and this is what I do. I just go around and check the leaves. So there's a little bit of yellowing along the edges like this. Alocasias are notorious for spider mites and thrips. You can hardly ever see spider mites. You might see some webbing on the leaves or on the underside, just where the petiole connects to the leaf. Look at the beautiful philodendron Columbia leaves. This one has thrip damage. Right there, you can see there's a little bit of that streaking on the leaf. I did find, see if I can get a closer or better picture. I did find a thrip on here the other day. I don't know if there is any or not, but this is kind of the pattern that they'll have. It's basically, they just go along sucking the sap out of the leaves, but what a beautiful plant. I love this area right here. It's got this big beautiful leaf, this alocasia. This is a super hardy regal shield. Here's the philodendron maximum, I believe. Here's what's left of my Monstera mint, thrip damage. Got some browning on the stem there. The leaves, they had thrips on them. So yeah, I'll just go around and inspect all of my plants and their leaves. Not really seeing too much else around here right now, but here's a yellow leaf. This one is the philodendron Jerry Horn, I think it's called. Might be some thrip damage up there, but right down here is a yellowing leaf. Now, it is one of the older leaves, so I'm not too concerned about this one. It's probably, again, just the natural progression of the plant. I'm just going to pull that off like that and discard this. So the other ones, they're looking okay. Nothing too crazy, but yeah. So this one here, it's got some pretty consistent yellowing, not blotchy or patches, so this is telling me it's just an old leaf dying off. Here is an alocasia. This is the dragon scale. Two nasty leaves. I'm going to pop these off. It's getting, looks like a growth point right there, so I'm going to cut those off. It's got 2 beautiful leaves right there, so that can go right there. I'm just going to be looking over this alocasia. So this has a deformed leaf right there, so I guarantee there's going to be a thrip in there. They like to cause damage right there, so just keep an eye on your plants, looking underneath the leaves, checking for pests, especially if you have a certain plant that is prone to pests. See, like this is going to be spider mite damage. Pretty sure about that. Then on my Philodendron domesticum, this is pretty classic thrip damage right there. You can see all these little streaking patterns. It has some deformity right here when the leaf was unfurling. They usually take some bites out of the back and then it ends up leaving some physical damage. So right up here, you can see there's some streaking patterns. This is very typical of what you'll find with thrip damage. I have to show my big new Monstera leaf back there. This is the Splendid. You can see this one's getting some damage there too. So I've sprayed this one down a couple times and treated it with an insecticidal soap. The last leaf I'm going to cut off is this Anthurium leaf right here. It's the oldest one, so this one I'm just going to cut off like so. It's actually got a little inflorescence there as well. So this is what I do with my ugly leaves. I cut them off, throw them in the compost, put them in the garbage, or whatever you want to do. If you don't like the leaf, it's your plant, cut it off and just be happy with the plant. Also, if you're not happy with the entire plant, don't feel bad for throwing it away as well. I've thrown out many plants over the years, and yeah, if you don't like it or if you just don't enjoy it anymore, throw it out, give it away. But if you have any other comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. I always appreciate the support and you guys watching my videos. Take care, everyone. Bye.